Welcome to The Price of Success, the podcast where we tell the whole truth about what it costs to build the business and life God created you for. We're here to remind you that conditions are never perfect. Success always comes with a price, and you're not the only one paying it. Let's get started. Let's talk about the kind of success that looks perfect until you feel the weight of it. JT Harp spent 30 years in the corporate world. He rose all the way up. He had the title, he had the status, he had the stability, he had it all. One day, he walked away. Not because he failed, but because he didn't want to wake up later with one thing haunting him: regret. In this episode, JT describes leaving certainty for the unknown. Writing a big check, losing the corner office, and from being the guy who people chased to now being the guy making cold calls and asking business owners to talk to him. This is a story about identity, about family, about fear, and why the safe choice sometimes costs you more than the risky one does. So, if you have ever wondered if you're meant to pivot, this episode is for you. Mr. JT Harp, welcome to The Price of Success, sir.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chris. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, man. Gosh. So me and you had a conversation prior to this, JT, and as I was looking at your LinkedIn, like trying to prepare for this episode, it's unreal, man. You look at your experience and you're like, okay, it would appear based on this guy's work experience, he worked retail for Kroger, worked his way all the way up to a vice president. That's amazing. There's got to be a story there. And then he leaves Kroger, becomes a COO of another company in a similar industry, and then he just jumps into entrepreneurship, right? Like, just look, clean upward progression, no big deal, right? So for those of us who may have seen that and now realize that you are an entrepreneur, you are now totally on your own, what would you say people misunderstand about your story and the progression?
Yeah, well, on the surface, to your point, it seems like a sort of the proverbial hockey stick, right? Straight up at a 45-degree angle. And, the devil's always in the details. And it's been a journey, that's for sure. And I would like to think that's a journey that a lot of us are on currently. And there's bumps in the road, there's crevices, there's cracks, there's potholes on the road of life, and I've certainly had my share of those. That being said, to your point, if you look back on it, as I have on my own personal, corporate career life journey, super proud of it. Very little I would change. Learned a lot. But yeah, along the way, there's been some obstacles and opportunities that I'm proud to say, for the most part, I've overcome and have grown from all of that. And it's gotten me to where I am today. So.
Excellent, man. Well, we're definitely gonna highlight some of those things. I think some selfish questions for me and those that might be listening or watching would be that, okay, so there's kind of two paths in terms of entrepreneurship. There's those guys that just jump out and, dare I say, a bit reckless. They're entrepreneurs from the start. They never even taste the corporate world or any organized business. But you're the other guy. You're the guy that was incredibly consistent all of these years. 30 years at the same company is a long time, man. And so take me back even before Kroger, though, JT. I would love to know just where did you get this level of consistency? Who or what shaped that in you?
Yeah, so I'll start with my parents and really my grandparents and my family lineage. I'm from a family of farmers, agriculturalists. And when you're raised on a family farm like I and my sister were, you come to appreciate very quickly at a young age the importance of a good, solid work ethic. You put that into practice at a young age, and certainly you see that through your parents and your grandparents growing up. And so super proud and happy to have been lucky enough to have been born into those types of opportunities where at a very young age I was able to observe and realize what it takes to be successful. up at dawn, down at dusk, and sometimes after. 12, 14-hour days, a lot of things dependent on the weather and market factors you can't control, but yet you still have to persevere and move on. So my parents and my grandparents on both sides were really good role models on that front. As far as a little bit more about me personally, I don't know what it was, but for whatever reason, at a very young age, I loved going to the grocery store with my mom. If she didn't take me, I was upset. When she did take me, I was super excited, ready to go, highlight of the week. I would help her organize all the groceries geometrically in the bass cart. I would try to guess what the total was going to be of the order for that day. I was really observant about, the stock boys and girls stocking the shelves, the ordering process, the checkout process, just fascinated by the whole thing. And so very lucky in the fact that from a very young age, I knew what I wanted to do. And I saw myself doing that for a really long time. And I say lucky because I had a lot of family and friends that even through college and after, and to be honest with you, sometimes still to this day, throughout middle age and beyond, they still haven't found their passion. They're still seeking that occupation, that opportunity, that drive and that focus in life that lights them up. And I feel really bad when I see that, especially those that are closest to me, because I never had to worry about that. Through grade school, through high school, through college, I had a North Star. And it was to, be a senior leader, specifically at the Kroger company. And that certainly helped. But yeah, from call it 4 or 5 years old, I had that passion and I just saw it through.
See, man, this is what I love about podcasting. It's just like you would see he was in retail and think he was just young. He just went to get a job at a grocery store. But you're literally telling me there was a deeper connection to the grocery store for you. When you think about it, you strike me as a pretty process-driven guy, right? So when you think about it, what was it about? What is it about the way that grocery stores and retail operates that drew you in?
I like sales. What got me excited the most, even as a little bagger, courtesy clerk at Kroger, was seeing the store come to life during the day and then seeing the consumer react to what we presented or set up for them. And then seeing the result of that, right? So whether it was the ching, ching, ching at the register, or whether it was seeing an amazing display that my team and I built, and then at the end of the day, see that almost dwindle down to nothing, knowing that we captured incremental sales that most likely that consumer wasn't planning to buy. And to me, that's the essence of sales. And on top of all of that, throughout the course of my corporate career in grocery, at the root of it, this is going to sound really dorky and a little sappy, but it's genuine, right? We are, or we were, when I was in that role, we were feeding families. And families gather around the dinner table. They plan the picnic lunches. They rally around breakfast, tailgating, holidays. Food is the core. Food and beverage is the core of pretty much any opportunity or occasion where humans connect. And so what we did at Kroger is we provided opportunities to enhance those experiences, those occasions, those memories. And whether it was a boring old can of beans or whether it was, an unbelievably juicy, ready-to-go filet mignon, we were helping those families enhance their lives in some small way. And we were able to do that over and over and over and over and over again through, running great stores, having friendly associates, and, being a true part of the community. And in those ways, yes, it's sort of in me to some degree, but I found purpose and passion through all of those things I just described. And again, I'm a grocery dork, and that's perhaps why I found so much success over the years, is because it never felt like work to me. I loved getting up out of bed, jumped out of bed, leapt at the next opportunity, and ran really hard and was really good at it for a really long time. And it was a passion of mine.
Yeah. That's really interesting, obviously, with your parents, your grandparents in agriculture. So, I mean, you've been in food your entire life,
That's right?
And yeah, dude, that's so wild.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, so take me from you are so passionate about this. Did you just jump into this world when you were really young and you're like, cool, I'm just going to bag groceries and get in on, the entry level ground floor? Or where did you start and where did it take you?
Yeah. So again, from an early stage of life, had a passion for it, and I went to my Kroger store ever since I was able to start driving in high school. I went to the Kroger store in my neighborhood about once a week after I turned in my application, bugging them or begging them to hire me. Back then, unlike today, it was a real opportunity to be employed by someone like Kroger, and it wasn't easy. There was kind of a waiting list, and you had to kind of wait your turn and hope to get a call. And so got in, and once I started, I had the intention of staying with Kroger, getting my education, and then going into management and climbing the corporate ladder. So yeah, I did my best to engage and learn from every kind of stop along the way with the intent of gaining more and more and more responsibility, because with more responsibility, I could more positively impact our company, our associates, and our customers, and that's what I wanted. I took strength finders throughout the middle part of my corporate career, and my number one strength within the personality test you go through is significance. And with significance, it basically means inherently that everything I do has to matter. And I wanted to get to the next position. I wanted to get into that boardroom. I wanted to be a decision maker because I wanted to positively impact others in a larger way. And so just, throughout the course of that internal drive and throughout the, process of just being passionate about selling groceries and being impactful, I just naturally, had a goal and a mission to continue to rise through the company and impact more people and more results.
Yeah. Well, to that end, you talk about significance and everything having to matter. Mm-hmm. You mentioned to me, like, you work your way all the way up in this company, but there came a point where it was like it was your identity, right? But when it comes to doing all these things that matter, leaning into significance, what would you say were some of the major disciplines in your time there that allowed you to just jump from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next? Like personal disciplines that really shaped how success was repeatable.
Yeah, so over the course of my career, I sort of narrowed that down to 4 kind of personal disciplines. And throughout the back half of my career in different senior leadership roles, I tried to share these with as many associates as possible within the framework of, you're never going to get to a scenario where you're perfect at these, but the constant pursuit and drive towards getting a little bit better each day, each week, each month will take you a long way. And as you rise throughout any corporate career, there's a lot more demands and a lot more pressure, and your time gets squished. And so these 4 things to me enabled me to continue to succeed regardless of the situation or demands on me and or my team. The first one certainly would be time management. If you don't have really good personal time management skills, you really have no chance, because there's just so many things coming at you, so many balls you have to continue to juggle. You're just not going to be as successful as you could or should be. The second would be personal organization. Always had good systems and processes in place, whether that was through my email, my digital files, my paper files, systems, finding balance between corporate and home life, if you will, just keeping everything together. Being really rigid on personal organization really helped me a lot. The third one would be just communication, whether that's the verbal communication, the written communication, or just quite simply, body language, facial expressions. If you're in a leadership role, those things matter. You can't scale yourself and exponentially be more productive if you're not able to clearly communicate expectations, clearly communicate feedback, and so on and so forth. And so just the overall communication disciplines that I was able to continue to hone over the years really took me a long way. the devil is in the details, and a lot of executives tend to kind of gloss over the details, and they may miss some things and or perhaps over-rely on their team to pick those little details up. I tried not to lead that way. I tried to do my best to get into the details and communicate where those little wins or losses might be, and then ask my team to identify those appropriately. So yeah, those 4 disciplines to your question have enabled me to be as successful as I can be over the last several years for sure.
Now, would you say that those 4 disciplines were the major things that, helped the organization trust you with more, or there was something more aligned to your value systems and the ways that you operated outside of that? Here's why I'm asking that question, JT. It's like those things you said, not rocket science, but incredibly hard to stay consistent with, right? And so since I do not understand corporate culture at all, this is a very selfish question. It's like, is it all just a matter of like doing the thing you're supposed to do over and over again in a repeatable way? Or does it really come down to the standards you're willing to, or the standards you set and you're willing to, and you're unwilling, to falter on them, if you will?
Yeah, just like a lot of these types of questions, it's a mix of both, right?
Yeah.
When you're working with a large or for a large corporation, like Kroger or Bimart or whatever, there is a level of operational scalability and repeatability that you need to execute against, certainly, or you're just not going to be successful. But yeah, from a value standpoint, my value hierarchy for pretty much all of my corporate career was completely and totally aligned with the company's. And at Kroger, and I'd like to think through my leadership and through others, yes, you have to execute and get results, but if you don't do that right through people, you're not going to be as successful as you could be or should be. And those 2 things really have to align. You have to have the discipline, the skill sets, the operational fortitude to scale and repeat, to your point, but you got to do that through people. And if you attack such opportunities robotically and without people at the forefront, then you're probably not going to be successful, certainly not in the Kroger corporate culture. And so, again, a big part of why I'd like to think I was successful is because I was able to do both at a high level for a really long time. And then, again, when you back that up through all the passion I had for the business, again, for most of those 30 years, I felt like I didn't work a minute in my life. I so enjoyed it.
What about the pivot from corporate to the next stage? I'm curious, though, what did the corporate environment reward, and what did it also suck away?
Yeah, I think as you get older, or as we all get older, at least for me, my priorities changed. And so as I mentioned earlier in our conversation, I had this really bright, glowing North Star from a corporate / career standpoint that was, senior leadership position at the Kroger company. And while that star never went away, I very quickly, as I grew older, got married, had children, I started to have this other big glowing North Star in the sky as well, and that was the priority of family and the priority of, time with my loved ones, right? And so in the spirit of this conversation around, the price of success, there's always a price, there's always a cost. And within most companies, even entrepreneurship, which we'll get into shortly, I'm sure, it takes a lot of you. Time, energy, mental capacity, true sacrifice to get the results and inspire others in a way that moves the company and business forward. And I started with Kroger when I was 16 years old. I got married, we'll call it 9 or 10 years later, something like that. And then another 4 or 5 years after that, started having children. And, when the children are young, you're in one phase, and then they get a little older, you're in the next phase, and so on and so forth. And in parallel to my kids getting older, I was also earning more and more responsibility in my corporate role, which at some point was too often taking me away from my growing family. Travel, late meetings, overnights, and just a lot more, we'll call it mental and emotional stress on, driving results and moving the business forward. In the meantime, I wanted to coach my kids. I wanted to be home as many nights as I could for dinner. They wanted me to spend time with them on the weekends and in the evenings. And, Chris, that's a time of life, and those are moments that if you don't capture them then, you're not going to get them back. And there were too many times for me that, I felt I was missing. And the scale for a lot of my Kroger career, we'll just call it corporate career, was, whatever I was putting into Kroger, I was getting back and then some. It was an unbelievable kind of match made in heaven type of thing for a lot of reasons that we've, some of which I've already discussed. But as my kids got older, the demands of the job got more intense and the demands at home got more intense. That scale started to flip a little bit to where as much as I was putting into Kroger, I was sacrificing too much on the other side of the scale, at least in my mind and in my heart, right? And so at some point within my corporate career, for me, it started to not quite be worth it anymore. And when you have those two, I hate to say competing because they're complementary, right? But when you have those two North Stars in the sky and there's only so much of you, to give, you got to make choices, right? And it started, while I was still all in and putting every bit of me into my corporate role in the company and my associates and our clients and our results. It was starting to tear at me a little bit because I felt like I wasn't able to give as much as I should be giving at home, whether that was time, attention, whatever. So that's when things started to shift for me a bit. Not that I wasn't any less passionate, not that I wasn't
Sure.
any less talented or good at it, but I started to, there was another star in the sky that was going perhaps a little brighter than the other one for the first time in several decades for me. So to answer your question, that's kind of what started the tipping point, if you will, for me on those focus areas.
For sure. And it's admirable, right? To take your North Star from, okay, cool, I want to reach these high level positions, and then change it to like, oh, wow, what's really important in life? And so give me some context around this. As this started to feel heavy, as you started to feel like, oh, man, time is whizzing by, my kids are getting older. About how old were they? What season were you in? Because there are several seasons here.
Yeah, so my oldest would have been in middle school. My second oldest, 18 months behind him. And then the twins, I've got 4 boys. The twins would have been in elementary school. So active into sports, active into extracurriculars, doing well at school. Yeah, just all the things, right? That was about the season of life when I started, questioning my role in their lives, my role at corporate, and my identity, to your point earlier.
Sure. And what made you feel like entrepreneurship would solve that problem?
Yeah, I guess to some degree, I've always had a little bit of an entrepreneurial itch, always admired those that had the intestinal fortitude, we'll call it, to go out on their own, whether, to your point earlier, it's, right out of high school or college or very early in life or later. And I was also at the point in my corporate career where, I was moving my family about every 2 to 3 years. And that was starting to weigh on us. And, when it was just my wife and I, or, if it was just my wife and I and our kids that were younger, kids didn't have any opinions. They just wanted to be with mom and dad. They would have gone anywhere. But, as your kids get older, they form relationships and friendships, and their worlds kind of get, flipped upside down whenever you move and relocate to another part of the country. And quite frankly, after the 6th, 7th, 8th move, my wife and I were kind of feeling the same. You entrench yourself in a community and you get to know the other parents and the other coaches, and you get into your routines, and then you get uprooted from all of that. And that was really hard. We had a lot of moves that, for the right reasons we made, but man, they were really emotionally draining. And you literally start all over. Every 2 to 3 years, that's what we were doing, and it was just really draining on us. So, yeah, after about the 7th or 8th move, I started thinking, whether it's at Kroger or somewhere else, I don't know that I want the specter of possibly having to move for the next promotion weighing on us for much longer. And that's really what it was. I mean, we'd move and we'd get established, and then the question, that none of us would ever really vocalize was, how long are we going to be here? And for us, that was just, we couldn't really do that much longer. And so, again, whether it was at Kroger or with someone else, I just started thinking, from an entrepreneurship standpoint, what if, instead of, just being a little curious or maybe scratching that itch part-time, what if I started thinking about doing my own thing full-time? And it took me a while to obviously make the leap, which I'm sure we'll get into, but the spirit of that was, I learned a lot from Kroger. They'd gained a lot from me. It was a great relationship. But what if I could take those best practices, those skills that I developed over the years, and apply those to my own opportunity, to my own business, to my own brand, and continue to provide a level of service that I know I can develop and scale, based on everything I've learned at Kroger and so forth. And that's kind of how I got to that point, at least mentally.
Yeah. So you say, what if, right? And I don't know if you're familiar with Les Brown, but he has this very interesting question for people. He says, where's the place on earth that has the most untapped potential? Mm-hmm. Have you ever heard this before? Mm-hmm. And everyone guesses all these places, right? And he's just like, the graveyard, man. It's the graveyard. It's where all the almost authors were, the almost entrepreneurs, all the people who had dreams who never did it. JT, so many people have the what if moments, whether it's like, I had one too many glasses of wine, I'm feeling a little bullish right now or not, we don't know. But what's the difference between somebody like you saying what if and actually acting on it, and someone who's just like, yeah, what if?
Well, I can pretty much tell you and the listeners that one of my biggest fears, probably the biggest fear I have in life, is regret.
Yeah.
I'm a firm believer we only get one shot at this. Yeah. And I've read some books, I've talked to some folks that have had regrets late in life. In fact, way too many folks that have had regrets in life. And I don't want to be that person that thinks back and wishes they'd done X, Y, or Z. To me, that's the ultimate negative way to leave this earth, is to think back and wonder what if. And I don't want that for me. I don't want that for my family. And you got to take chances in life. You got to make sacrifices. And I could very well be sitting here talking to you about my current, senior level position at corporate ABC. But as we talked a little bit about earlier, it was too big of a price to pay for me. And the regret on the flip side of that would have been, you drive and you drive and you drive and you drive and you work all these hours and you work these weekends, and before you know it, what you regret is all the time you missed with your children. And that was not going to be me. It just was not. Or my wife, for that matter, or my sister, my parents, a lot of good friends and family that over the years I moved away from. I didn't want that regret. It just was not worth it. The price was too much. And so I literally made choices in my career to not allow those sacrifices to be made, because for me there was too high of a cost, too high of a price. So for me, that's when you bring up, regret, and when you bring up, the graveyard metaphor that you mentioned, it's a little different for me perhaps in that, I didn't want to go to the graveyard wishing I'd spent more time at home and with my family, right? Yeah. And so I think what I've done is I've found a way to have a good, healthy balance that works for me. Still driven, still goal and career oriented. For all of these reasons, still trying to set the example for my boys without paying too high of a cost on the human side of things. Because in my opinion and in my heart, that at the end of the day, that's what really matters. You can go too far the other way as well and kind of be the starving artist type. That's not me. That's not how I'm wired. So I've rigidly throughout the entire part of my adult life, tried to find a nice, healthy balance. And again, as we discussed, for a long while, even though I was grinding in my corporate career, I was able to find that, again, until the scale started tipping, and then I knew it was time, and I had the self-awareness to, fortunately, know when it was time to move on to other things. So hopefully that answers your question.
Very much so.
Yeah.
It absolutely does. Now, most people would head to the next season, but I want to camp out here for a hot second because there's something very important about what you just said. You said there's the starving artist type, and then there's you, right? You're very calculated, seem very responsible, like, okay, here's the formula. And so when you have that what if moment and you're like, cool, I think I'm going to do this. I have a few questions here that I want to parse out. Is number one, it's like, was it like, okay, babe, we're going to do this and we're 3 years out and now we just have to like cut back our spending, or I need to get another promotion. How fast was this and how did you even know what you were going to do?
So again, multiple ways to answer that. At the highest level, it was very slow. Okay. Again, corporate career at Kroger specifically was one of my North Stars. I'd planned on retiring at Kroger, really never saw myself going anywhere else. COVID hit. Grocery, you couldn't get toilet paper on the shelf, trying to keep everybody safe, working long hours. I was up for another move or another promotion, if you will, to another part of the country. Made that move during the pandemic. That was really hard on the family and really hard on me personally. But we made that move. It was overall a pretty good move. Loved the area of the country we moved from and to. So that was good, but there was a lot of things going on. Life events, COVID, pandemic, kids moving from one school to the other, making new friends. There was just a lot going on. And so during that time, again, middle school to elementary school were where my kids were, I started thinking about possibly a life outside of Kroger for the first time in almost 30 years. That was really hard. And throughout my Kroger career, I had recruiters calling me fairly often. And I would never take their calls, but I started to listen. Because, for a lot of the reasons we've already discussed, I just felt that maybe I'm not too much longer for this type of work/life environment, right?
Okay, so real fast, just so you're aware, right? I'm asking these questions because these are the mental battles, right, that people would be going through. Mm-hmm. When we finally jump to entrepreneurship, we'll be able to expand all this stuff. But JT, this is the stuff that, like, I believe this is where the rapport is built with the people listening, the people who could be interested in selling their business, who want somebody who just gets it, right? Mm-hmm. Who makes good decisions, but also gets it and realizes like the deeper things in life. Those are the things I'm trying to parse out. Cool?
Love it.
Okay. Has this been good and helpful so far?
Yeah, hopefully the same for you.
Oh, really, really good, man. You're communicating your story beautifully.
Okay, good. Thank you.
A million times better from the nosedive we took in the beginning with the tech issues. So, okay, cool. So you started going into the Buy Mart story.
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
Yeah. So try to pick up where I was. So for the first time in a long time, I started listening to recruiters and thinking about myself outside of the Kroger ecosystem, which was a really big deal. And so for really the last year and a half or 2 years at Kroger, I was talking to some recruiters confidentially, listening to some options, and really just trying to get my mind around a potential new identity. And so, similar industry, just different brand, but you got to remember, friends, family, everyone that has ever known me, oh, you're the Kroger guy. How's everything going at Kroger? Are you running Kroger yet? How's everything, Yeah. And so a really, really big deal. And so, again, for the last year and a half or so, I was contemplating an exit. And when the day came, that was really hard. After, almost 30 years of pouring pretty much all of me into a brand and a team and an organization and feeling so passionate about it. And for most all of those 30 years, never even considering leaving. But, it was the right thing to do for me personally. It was the right thing to do for my family. And, these big decisions, if you don't have support at home, you really have no chance. And thankfully, I married really, really well. And she fully supported me and saw that it was time for me and for us to move on. And so I made that decision and, resigned and moved on to another chapter of life and moved across the country one more time. And as passionate as I was and as much success as I had at Kroger, I have complete closure. It was time. It was time. And, I miss some things about it and certainly miss a lot of the people, but I've never really regretted it. And that's no ill will to Kroger or, to anybody there. It was just, sometimes it's just time, and it was my time, and took the next journey and chapter of life, which I never expected. But, thankfully had the intestinal fortitude to make the decision, had the support at home to do it, and never really looked back.
So to be clear, from a timeline perspective, it sounded like you were about 15 years in when you were like, what if? And then it was another 15 years until you resigned. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, when you say what if, I think the 15-year mark in was when my kids started coming into our lives in a bigger way, right? Sure. And I started to have some competing priorities there, which is, part of life's journey. Not too surprising, hopefully, for a lot of us, but still, until you live through it, you really don't know. Sure. And then, the back half of my career, while I continued to grow and thrive, it was really the last couple of years when I first started considering an exit, if that helps.
Okay. Yeah. And then what was next after that? So you leave Kroger. Did you jump straight into the entrepreneurial world where you're like, cool, what am I going to do? Who am I networking with? I mean, walk me through how you got to where you're at. Yeah,
so my wife and I, while I was at Kroger, scratched, again, a little bit of an entrepreneurial itch by opening up a couple of small businesses in Columbus, Ohio for a couple of years.
Excellent.
And again, we thought we'd give it a shot, and we found a general manager to kind of help us run things, and it went okay. We learned a lot. But then, the pandemic hit, and we were not in Columbus. We were, in another state, and the pandemic changed a lot of things for a lot of different businesses and industries. And when the pandemic hit, it just proved too hard to continue. So we decided to peel those off and, maybe try something else at another time. And so that's how I got a little bit of exposure to business ownership and a lot of exposure to, running a business remotely and then ultimately selling a business. And like I said, learned a lot. Didn't really make any money, but we learned a lot. And so left Kroger shortly thereafter, joined another retailer in another part of the country, and thought we'd give that a go. And it went okay. Good company, good culture, good people. But for a lot of reasons, it just wasn't a really good fit. And so, again, as I mentioned earlier in our conversation, I'd already moved my family a lot.
Yeah.
My parents are here in the southern Ohio area. My sister's in Ohio. A lot of close family and friends are in Ohio. And I just ideally wanted to root my family somewhere where we didn't have to move again.
Right.
And if I could do that and live close to extended family so that my kids could grow up and get to know, my parents, my wife's parents, and, be close to grandma and grandpa, then that would be, utopia for us and for me. And so that's really what I was searching for. So, left Kroger, joined the other organization. Really wasn't an opportunity within that organization to get back to the Midwest. Wasn't a really good fit for a lot of reasons, as I mentioned. So started talking to some recruiters again with the intent of getting back home, if you will. And so had some opportunities in other parts of the country. Just really didn't want to start over again. Really didn't want to move my family again for, maybe a good fit, maybe not a good fit. Right. And so that's when I started thinking about entrepreneurship full time. As I mentioned, we started up and sold businesses in Columbus, and I got exposed to the business brokering industry within that process. And so I actually got to know Transworld through that process. And so Transworld's the world's largest business brokerage firm. We've been in business for over 45 years. They started scaling via franchising, a loose franchising model back in 2010.
Okay.
And so now we have over 300 offices in almost 30 countries. And so I reached out to the Transworld Ownership Group in Oregon, had some coffee, and I said, look, I'm thinking about exiting corporate full time, got some other opportunities, but really not super passionate about those. What can you tell me about helping me find a good business to buy? And so, one thing led to another. They said, yeah, we can help you find, a lot of good small business opportunities either here or, anywhere in the Midwest or wherever you'd like to go. Or, Transworld's looking for good people too. So I said, okay. And so got to know the leadership group at Transworld, really felt good about the culture and the leadership group within the organization. Got to know a handful of other owners within the Transworld network throughout the country. And it just so happened that Transworld had a big opportunity to open up an office right here in greater Cincinnati, northern Kentucky. So it just felt like, the stars were kind of aligning to go out on my own full time, get into something I think I would and could be super passionate about, similar to my passion within grocery retail. Sure. And it also roots our family back closer to home, closer to extended family. So talk about a tough decision, man.
Take me there, because here's what started to happen. We started to enter some moments, like this identity of like, man, the grocery store thing was so important to me, and then just working your way up, staying incredibly consistent, focusing on these 4 pillars, and, respecting these standards. And you became the Kroger guy, right? And then you're like, okay, what if? And then you and your wife started buying and selling businesses, or you started running businesses in Columbus, right? Just to kind of get a taste of entrepreneurship. But I don't want to gloss over this, like then this, then that, then this, then that, right? Because we all know there's an internal price to success as well, right? There's this identity shift. There's this like, oh crap. I mean, like, especially when you, like your story, it's almost like you had status. I mean, was it status to obscurity for a season? Was it status to status and everything JT touches turns to gold? I mean, dude, take me to the moment where you're like, okay, like I've tried this corporate thing. I'm done with it. I'm COO for a short blip in Eugene, Oregon. We moved our family again. I'm so done. Moved back to Ohio. But now you have all these opportunities, right? You have people who are willing to give you, recruiters reaching out to you saying, hey, here's stability. Come and take it again, right? And then you have an opportunity like this, which, I mean, you say franchise, I think, cool, I got to pull money out and figure this. There's risks that are involved here. So walk me through that a bit.
Oh, yeah, happy to. I'm proud of a lot of, what I've done and what we've accomplished as a family and what I've accomplished as a person, an individual, a leader, a father, a son, a husband. But you want to talk about tough. So, yeah, always had a sense of security, foundational stability. What does that mean? I knew who I was. I knew what I was good at. I had my North Stars in the sky, and I was on my way until I wasn't. And a lot of things changed in life. And what I've learned over the last handful of years is that you're not as in control of your life as you think you are. But the ability to find success and navigate through those waters is how you get to where you want to go, maybe even if it's not the path you thought you'd be on. And I had the golden handcuffs on, man. Salary, benefits, corner office, status, prestige, title, access to, a lot of perks, we'll just say. Travel, the whole thing. Large house, schools. I earned it. I earned every penny. I earned every bit of it. And the transition from corporate to entrepreneurship, I was literally shaking when I signed the documents to make the investment in, the Transworld Network, and honestly make the investment in my new identity. And I'm really proud of myself for that, because not everybody's got the intestinal fortitude to do that. But why do we do it? Well, because it's worth it. And we do it because at some point even if it's not the path you'd plan to be on, you take the different path because you believe in yourself. And you believe in, even though this wasn't my plan, I'm going to get this done no matter what. I've got this. And so I broke away from the golden handcuffs, wrote a pretty sizable check, was stripped of all of that long list of stuff that I just rambled off. My family was all the way on the other side of the country. I was literally shaking, leaving the house, kissed my wife, and I asked her, am I doing the right thing here? And as I said earlier, super supportive, amazing woman. You got this. Got on the plane, went to South Florida for training, flew right back here after a couple weeks of training to Cincinnati. And I went from corner office, title, all that stuff. People were begging me for my time. The script was completely flipped. And now I was basically a nobody, begging small business owners to talk to me. You want to talk about an identity shift. You want to talk about something very humbling. You want to talk about a situation where you got to swallow your pride, And the best way for me to handle, and I think most of us to handle that type of anxiety, is just to take action. Don't sit around and think about it and worry and stress. And, there's time for all of that, but there's going to be less time if you just get off your butt, get out there and take action. And so I was cold calling small business owners. I was looking up small business opportunities on Craigslist to see if they needed my help. I was networking at every networking event I could get to. My family was on the other side of the country. We were trying to sell a house out there. We were trying to find a house here. I was trying to find a house here in a great community and set them up for success in a great school system. We did all that in about 3 or 4 months, and with really no safety net. No salary, no benefits, no signing bonus, no relocation package, no office. True entrepreneurship, right? I mean, I was staying with my aunt and uncle in northern Cincinnati for a while. I was borrowing my parents' car off and on as I was in and out of town. I was literally bootstrapping this thing in my mid to late 40s during my prime earning years, and I left a lot, right? And so, yeah, I'm proud of it. And we're still building things. I'm really proud of where we've come in the last couple of years. We're helping people, which I'm sure we'll get into. But, Chris, I'm the happiest I've ever been. But to get there, it's a tremendous amount of sacrifice. And you got to launch yourself into the abyss of the unknown sometimes. And, I've got a lot of really good close friends that are, still in corporate, whether that's at Kroger or at, different CPG companies or whatever. And I just don't know that, I feel sorry for them sometimes because I don't know that everyone has the, intestinal fortitude to make those sacrifices and create or leap into an identity shift like I have. And I'm not saying I did everything perfect, but I am proud of, where I came from and who I am now, because there's very few folks that I think are willing to do that, especially in, the middle of their prime earning careers when you still got, 4 young boys at home and college on the way and, all these life responsibilities. That's a pretty big ask to, have somebody make that change. And, again, so far so good for me.
It's fantastic, man. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing those real moments, because, again, we could just go this, then that, then this, then that, but, that is entrepreneurship. Those are the real stories. The stakes are real. You know that, and I know that, and many that have come on this show know that. And so tell me, you write this sizable check to Trans World, your family's across the country. Like you said, you went from corner office to, where people are asking for your attention to where you're asking for their attention now, okay? Total paradigm shift, okay? What were the stakes, though? What if it didn't work?
Well, stakes were high. Look, first and foremost, me and my ego aside, although that's part of it, me and my ego aside, I've got 5 other human beings and a golden doodle counting on me, right? We've invested pretty well, and we had some savings, and we weren't going to be on the streets in the short to medium term if this didn't work out. But again, it's kind of like the magic of compound interest. You never want to interrupt that. And I felt like to a large degree that was the biggest risk, was interrupting the continued, as we discussed earlier, ascent on the chart of constant and consistent progression up the corporate ladder, so to speak. On top of that, I had to find a way to sit across from other small business owners and convince them that I was the man, or I was the guy for the job that could help them get to their next chapter of life, which I'm sure we'll talk about. And so I think what you'll find is a lot of skill sets are transferable, and I've applied a lot of what I learned over my corporate career to what I'm doing now. And on top of that, small business ownership experience, know what it's like to buy, own, and sell a business. I've been able to very quickly relate to my clients. And so that's been a really big help as well. But I didn't know that 2.5 years ago. I literally was reinventing myself on the fly. And so to your question, the risk is, what if it doesn't work? I don't know. You just move forward in life and you figure it out, right? You got to have that grit. You got to have that intestinal fortitude and that determination, and to some degree that level of confidence that, no matter what, I'm going to figure this out. And so, after 30 years of having that foundation, having that security, not easy. And there were a lot of nights and a lot of mornings and a lot of weekends and a lot of days where, did I do the right thing? Did I do the right thing? And, for me, Chris, if it was just me, no problem. I'll figure it out. I can reinvent myself. I'll move on. But again, I got 5 other lives, 5 other humans counting on me. And maybe even more than that, I've got 4 sons that are watching.
Yeah.
And a big part of my role as a dad, and I would argue as a man in general, is to set the example and to show my boys, even if you get kind of knocked off the path you thought you were going to be on, you pick yourself up and you figure it out, right? And then even on top of that, whether they want to go into, a corporate role or entrepreneur role or a little bit of both, you can be successful if you put your mind to it and you just are willing to put the work and the time in, along with a little bit of passion for what you do. You're going to be massively successful. So, the risk was high, but that's, you can't just sit back and wait for life to come at you. You got to go out and get it.
Yeah.
And, I've done a lot of kind of deep thinking and reflecting and just kind of figuring me out and life out over the last 4 to 5 years, we'll say. And one of the things I've kind of read through and learned and absorbed in my thoughts are, there's a reason the stories we gravitate to and the fairy tales we gravitate to have, heroes and villains. And, whether it's, Star Wars or the Avenger movies or, whether it's the prince or the king or whatever, you're never going to find anybody that's truly happy and successful sitting back and waiting for things to happen. You got to go out and fight dragons.
Yeah.
Well, why would you do that? Not to get too dorky here, but I'm a big Star Wars fan, and
Amen.
Why wouldn't the rebels just sit back and just live a quiet life and go to the far reaches of the galaxy and just enjoy? 'Cause that's not a life. You gotta have significance, and you gotta have passions, and you gotta have purpose. And so the reason all of our heroes go out and fight those dragons is because A, it's worth it, B, it provides purpose, and C, what are the dragons always guarding? The treasure.
Yeah.
There's always something on the other side of those challenges. And so for me, whether that was overcoming the daily, the weekly, the annual challenges in the corporate world, just to provide growth and continue to build business and whatnot, or now with balancing kids and life and family and career, or now if it's completely reinventing myself and starting all over, I'm going to continue to go out and fight those dragons because it's worth it. Because it's worth it because the treasure is there to be had. And the treasure isn't the gold and the money, it's purpose and the meaning of life, right? And so by going out and fighting dragons, I'd like to think in a bigger picture way, also showing my kids that, you're not just going to sit in your basement. You got to go out and experience life and meet people and get things done and to some degree fight dragons. Well, why? Well, because it's worth it. Because it's worth it. And so that's a big part of, my overall journey, but especially these last, 4, 5, 6 years is, pivoting that North Star to maybe other things, reinventing myself, and to some degree finding new dragons to conquer because it's worth it.
It's powerful, man. And that's really, really, really powerful. I love your story. I love what you represent. I love that you spent so much time in corporate, and you now can say you were successful there and you were successful here. So before we pivot to Trans World, and you get to kind of tell us a little bit more here, I'm curious, what do you feel like? Let me ask you this way: do you feel like you have to operate differently than you did when you were in corporate as an entrepreneur, or is it fairly similar based on the positions that you were able to attain?
I would say it's very similar. People at the forefront, processes and systems in place, and whether you're selling a can of beans or whether you're selling a multi-million-dollar business, at the end of the day, it's all about providing the highest level of service to improve people's lives. And again, that sounds a little dorky when you consider a can of beans, but I think the meaning of most business and the meaning of life is really just all about helping others.
Yeah.
I mean, you just distill out all the other details. You're going to find purpose and meaning in life if you just focus on others and helping others. And so when you're in any kind of a sales role, that focus transcends, again, whether it's a box of cereal or a multi-million-dollar business. And so for our buyers that are looking for great businesses to buy, we're doing our best to communicate and translate value,
Sure.
provide opportunities or inventory for our buyers to shop and to choose and to, analyze. No different than the consumer analyzing where she's going to shop from one day to the next, 1 week to the next, and or once she gets in our stores, what brand she's going to buy. Either way, we're helping solve a problem. What she's going to serve, who she's going to serve, in what quantity she's going to serve, how much she's willing to pay, what the value proposition is, et cetera. All of those things translate to buying and selling businesses. And so at a very foundational level, myself and my team here at Transworld, to your question, are really focused on a lot of the same things we focused on in my corporate world in food retail. Just helping people live better lives, helping people solve their problems, helping people get from one day to the next. The transaction sizes may be different, the stakes may be different, but when you distill it all down, it's the exact same. So we're focused on service, we're focused on value, whether that be, service and value to our sellers that are looking to exit out for whatever reason, which we'll get into, or our buyers that are looking to get into a great opportunity because they want to enter their next phase of life.
Yeah.
Put very simply, I feel as long as we continue to focus on the client and helping them get to whatever next phase of life that looks like, whether it be dinner this evening or a business they want to get into next month, next year, we're doing the same thing. It's all about helping people.
Yeah. It's interesting when you talk about helping people. What I've learned about helping people is the only way you can help people is if you understand them, right? If you take the time to understand them. And so, this isn't Transworld behind you. For those watching, this isn't just a brand that you wrote a check into and now you're just like, cool, this is my living now. Obviously, it means something more to you. So I guess I would ask, what have you learned about the people that you're serving in terms of being able to really show, I get it. I understand you. I understand the things you're going through. What are people going through that are trying to buy and sell businesses?
Every single person that we engage with on the seller side is going through a life event. Truly a life event. And what I mean by that is, let's assume that business owner A is ready to retire. He or she has had a plan. Similar to what we've already discussed, it's most likely their identity. It's who they are. They built this brand perhaps from scratch, and or they've owned it for perhaps decades. It's one of their children. And they are now, after several years and perhaps decades, ready to sell it. You talk about emotional.
Yeah.
On the other side, business owner B either didn't have much of a plan or they did have a plan and then they got off that path, similar to my journey. Tragic life event. Terminal, diseased, car accident, spouse or, business partner, health issue, divorce, partner disagreement, macroeconomic factors that have just completely derailed said business or industry that was, perhaps beyond their control. Weather event. You name it. Every deal and every business opportunity within our world now is different. Everyone has their story. And a lot of them are very tragic.
Yeah. Fairly reactive on the seller side then?
So on the seller side, yeah. And, whether they need to sell or whether they want to sell, they are going through a life event.
For sure.
On top of that, roughly 85 to 90% of small business owners don't have a traditional retirement fund or plan set up. The business is their retirement.
Yeah.
It's a large part of their net worth. A lot of them do have, assets and perhaps, home equity and those types of things. But, most don't have a traditional Roth, IRA, 401k, those types of retirement systems set up. So this is a major liquidity event for our business owners. And so the work we do for them, as far as confidentially going to market and finding them their exit, is their retirement. And Chris, we take that very seriously. Yeah. And so that's kind of hopefully gives you and the listeners a sense for the weight and the impact that our work has on people's lives. And to your point earlier, or to your question, I've been there. I've had those life moments, those life events, and fortunately and thankfully, nothing tragic and no health or disease or tragic life or death event in my immediate family. But just the things we've already discussed around just the total pivot of identity and family dynamics and cross country moves, and I've fortunately been able to look all of our business owners in the eye and connect with them to the point I get it. We owned our businesses in Columbus for just a handful of years, but man, you want to talk about hard. It was really hard to sell those and to move on. And for these folks, this is their lives and their livelihoods and a big part of who they are. And now all of a sudden, for whatever reason, intentionally or otherwise, they have to exit and get to that next chapter of life, whether they want to or not. And either way, it's a huge identity and mindset shift and lifestyle shift. Yeah. And the stakes are high for them, just like they were for my family and I.
Sure.
So, yeah, we do important work. And we take it very seriously because these are lives that are in our hands. And, much like my family, our business owners have others that are counting on them, and they want to look forward to a nice retirement or next phase of life or whatever that looks like. And it's up to us to confidentially go to market for them and try to deliver on that.
Yeah. Well, man, you seem like the guy to do it. I'm serious. Like, it is so empowering to hear a story like yours, to hear a guy that really said, hey, my North Star is career and then getting there and being like, oh wait, my North Star is people. And it starts with my family, right? And so it's family, but along the way, as I hear your whole story, it's been people, man. It's been people, and you understanding them and serving them and creating standards that have created amazing environments for those you've worked with, and what you're building at Transworld. Dude, it's so cool. It's so cool, man. And I'm incredibly honored to have been able to tell your story today, JT. I'd love for you to just give people an opportunity to, find you wherever, whether it be LinkedIn or your websites or whatever you guys need to do in order to connect with the public here.
Yeah, thank you, Chris, and thanks for that generous and nice recap, and thank you for the opportunity. Again, I guess I've been a little lucky in that in my identity shift, I've been able to once again find something I'm truly passionate about. We love our small business owners, truly believe the small business community is the fabric of our country. And, we're here to serve. We're here to help. And so, sure, Transworld Business Advisors of Greater Cincinnati, Northern Kentucky. Feel free to Google us. You'll find us on the World Wide Web and throughout most of your AI platforms. We are on social, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, X, and the like. Reach out to us anytime at 513-725-7283. Feel free to call and give me some feedback on this or whatever else you'd like to know about what we do and what we have to offer. I've got 7 other great team members that are helping us help more people. And whether it's myself or any one of our other teammates, we'd be happy to chat with you. My direct email is jharp@tworld.com. And we're here to help. And Chris, I can't thank you enough for the opportunity to chat with you and your listeners today. And I'll just say that anybody that's out there that might be struggling with a big career change or a life change, perhaps specifically maybe in a corporate environment, and you're thinking that it might be time to get out. I'm not saying I did everything perfectly, but hopefully listening today and if you'd like, I'm happy to talk further about how I might be able to help, or maybe if it's just provide a listening ear. I'm here for anybody that wants to chat, because again, it's if you think it's the time's right for you and you want to shift your identity for the right reasons, I pretty much promise you put the time and effort in, it's going to be worth it. So thanks again for the opportunity. I appreciate you.
JT, you are pros pro, sir. Thank you for coming on The Price of Success.